Okay, today is going to be really fun because today I'm giving you my 5 best Spurgeon books. Yes, a guy. Usually when I do these, I'm talking about topics. Today, I wanted to talk about my hero and just fanboy out for a little bit because there have been some prominent figures that different stuff has been going on, and I want to talk about someone that I can just be like really happy to talk about, and that is Charles Spurgeon. One of the best preachers to have ever preached, Prince of Preachers, that's his nickname. One of the best theologians, one of the best even collectors of theology. He's actually one of the people that brought the Puritan works to the 18th century and made sure that they were readily available. So a lot of those endured because of Charles Spurgeon and became more popular because of Charles Spurgeon. So there's a lot to be thankful for Charles Spurgeon. And so before I just like keep on going off the rails, I could give you story after story about Charles Spurgeon, but I'm not going to. I'm going to give you books instead. Books. That's what this video is about. So number 5, if you don't know anything about Charles Spurgeon, first go onto Wikipedia, educate yourself. You'll be really helped in just finding out a lot of like the biography of his life. But I would also say that you should invest in a biography of Charles Spurgeon, whether it's his is pretty good, his autobiography. There's a lot out there. Arnold Dollimore has done one. There's some great one. Ian Murray did the Forgotten Spurgeon. That's great. But my personal favorite is this one right here, Living by Revealed Truth by Tom Nettles. I love this book because this doesn't just give the biography, like the details about his life, but it dives deep into his theology and actually pieces together a lot of his sermons and different writings and basically boils it down to, okay, what does Spurgeon think about this subject? What does Spurgeon think about this subject? And kind of connecting all the dots for you, which I really appreciate. One that comes to mind is his work on regeneration. What did Spurgeon actually believe about regeneration in the Ordo Salutis? And here's something. The same truth he asserted in a sermon, All of Grace. The man believes, but the belief is only one result among many of the implantation of divine life within the man's soul by God himself. Again, in preaching on human inability, he taught that coming to Christ is the first effect of regeneration. So what did Spurgeon think about when someone is regenerated? Well, Tom Nettles does the work and pieces together different sermons, different works, and brings them all together to give you his understanding, Spurgeon's understanding of what it means to be regenerated. And when does that happen? I love it. This is a really helpful book. So that would be my number 5. Number 4 would just be it doesn't have to be this one necessarily. This one is from Holman, but this is Spurgeon's Sermons. And you can see I have the set back there. This is great. Basically, most of his sermons, we don't have all of them. There's another series going on. Is it Holman as well? The Forgotten Sermons of Spurgeon, something like that. The guy who's in charge of the Spurgeon Library down at Midwestern is putting those out. But there's a lot of sermons in here, and I love it because, first off, if you're talking about one of the world's greatest preachers, you should read his sermons. Like, obviously, we don't have audio, but we do have it written down for us. So let's read these things. And if you're a preacher and you're looking at it, don't you want to learn from better preachers? I guarantee you Spurgeon is a better preacher. And he's someone that you could learn from, and just look at how he relates deep theology to his audience, to his congregation. See how he pieces it together, how he makes it applicable. That doesn't get talked about enough. Spurgeon was so practical in his sermons. It wasn't just like, here's a lofty idea, you figure it out on how to apply it to your life. He would give all different kinds of examples. How should the mother apply this? How should the father apply this? How should we apply this to the workplace? Spurgeon was brilliant. Also, I read this every time I preach a sermon. I do my own work first, but then if Spurgeon preached on it and it's accessible, I will read it the night before I preach and maybe have a few things, kind of basically check whether I did it right or not. Not that Spurgeon is infallible. I'll talk about that here in a second. But, he's pretty good. So if I'm off on something from Spurgeon, that gives me a little bit of caution that maybe I should tone that back a little bit before going to the pulpit. But that's just me. But you should read his sermons. So get a collection like that. They're pretty cheap, actually. Like that set that I got is pretty accessible. Go to christianbook.com, and if you're in the United States, and you can get it for real cheap. Number 3 would be his commentary on the Gospel of Matthew. And I've talked about this a few times on my channel because I love it. I love it. This is my favorite work of Spurgeon. Just personally, it's just my favorite. Now, what this is interesting because this is actually his wife, Susanna, who compiled it after Spurgeon's death. Like, took all of his writings on Matthew and put it into publication. So this actually came out after Spurgeon died. But it's amazing. It's just like basically like 2 paragraphs about a couple verses from Matthew. And really, what I find interesting is that Spurgeon was still kind of piecing together his views about the kingdom of God. And that's really what this commentary is all about, is he's trying to figure out exactly what is the kingdom of God. And I think that's interesting that at least when I read it, I don't think that when he starts, he had as firm of a grasp on what he viewed the kingdom of God to be. And if you're a theologian, you know what I'm talking about. Dispensationalism, covenantalism, all that kind of stuff. What is the kingdom of God when Jesus says it versus what we see in books like in Revelation. So it's interesting to see him kind of get like, not necessarily change his views, but like a firmer grasp he gets on the kingdom of God. So I love this commentary. It's super helpful, especially on the Sermon on the Mount. Martin Lloyd-Jones has a book on the Sermon on the Mount that's fantastic, and everybody should read it if you're talking about the Sermon on the Mount, which I'm just realizing I should probably do one on the Sermon on the Mount, best books of. But this is also fantastic. So if you're preaching on Matthew, get this commentary. It's one of the best out there. And then number 2, I'm going to say, while this is probably my favorite of his works, this is probably the one that's going to help you the most, and that is Lectures to My Students. My copy is just beat up. I love this because it's basically Charles Spurgeon talking to his preacher's school and saying, hey, this is how you do ministry, and giving his views on pretty much everything related to the ministry of the local church, which I love. I will say he takes I think it's 3 chapters, or I don't know exactly how he put it, if it was like lessons or what, when he was actually saying it. But there's a lot on open air preaching and like door-to-door evangelism, which I have different views on than Spurgeon. But if you're wondering how to do that and maybe thinking through that, this would be a book for you. But basically, if you're a pastor, you're trying to train pastors, this is the book that you need to be reading to get a firm understanding about how the Metropolitan Tabernacle did it and Spurgeon and his views on pastoral ministry. Number 1, though, is one that I found at a used bookstore, and a lot of my books are used, but this one is just like, I love it. I love it so much. And it's this book of Spurgeon's sermon notes. You probably can't read it. But it just says Spurgeon's Sermon Notes, and it's from Zondervan. It was put out in 1941. I found it for 50 cents. So, but what this is basically just his outlines on all of his sermons, and it's just fantastic to read this. Like he preaches on 1 to 2 verses, and you can just see him outline that passage brilliantly. And then even one of my favorite things that they do in this book is that they give a few of the quotes that he used. Like if they had access to his notes, and if there were any quotes that he had written down, they would type it out here. And I just love that, to get a little bit more into his mind of where he was coming at from a passage, and what were some of the things, like not necessarily that he was going to actually preach, but some of the things that he thought were important for that text to understand it properly. It's in there, and I love it. So I'm sure that there are probably other versions of this. So I would say you can do a deep dive. This one, like I said, put out by Zondervan, and it is C.H. Spurgeon's Sermon Notes, Genesis to Revelation. It's 193 sermon outlines, and you can see right there, that's like the page that Spurgeon wrote on. That's what it looked like. And then they just edited it from there. So I just love it. I think that's super cool. And if you're a preacher, you should probably get something like that, and think about how you're outlining your own sermons. It's just super cool. So those would be my 5 books on Spurgeon that I think you should be reading. Let me know in the comments of other topics that you would like me to cover. Maybe best books on, I don't know, angelology, about angels. Something, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't liked this video, I'll be back on Monday. Monday's going to be fun, because Monday I'm talking about Spurgeon's favorite book. I'm going to be giving a full exposition. I've been doing a lot of research. Obviously, I've read it a ton of times, but Pilgrim's Progress. I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the theology of Pilgrim's Progress. So I'm really excited about that. And I'll see you on Monday talking about good old Christian and his journey to the celestial city. I'll see you then.